have been a history teacher for over 10 years now, and if there is one thing that I have learned about history, it is that the vast majority of it is boring. This channel is all about bringing you the most interesting and entertaining stories from human history, usually with a focus on the weird, unusual and macabre. But every now and then, we're all in need of a little light entertainment. And that is where this series comes in. In this series, I will be covering all aspects of history in a light-hearted way. Think of it like a history version of those BuzzFeed quizzes that you've probably all taken at some point. Today we're asking the question, why you wouldn't survive a week as a Viking. Before we get started, just a quick reminder to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. If you do enjoy this sort of content, I do actually put out a lot more than just these videos. There should be something for everyone. With that said, let's get into the video. Number 1, your weak tummy. We tend to think of Vikings as being these big, burly, meat-eating warriors. In reality, their diet wasn't that dissimilar to our own, and they weren't necessarily big fans of eating meat all of the time. A typical Viking feast would have consisted of a variety of meats, including pork, beef and mutton, as well as fish. They also ate lots of different vegetables, including kale, cabbage, carrots, onions, peas and beans. Fruit was also a staple of the Viking diet, with apples, pears, plums and cherries being particularly popular. The Vikings were also big fans of dairy products such as milk, cheese and butter. However, it wasn't always plain sailing when it came to food. The Vikings suffered from many of the same foodborne illnesses that we do today, including dysentery and typhoid fever. Meat and fish were often left to rot during the winter months and then eaten in the spring. As you can imagine, this led to a number of health complications. And this is one area where you wouldn't last long as a Viking. Your weak modern-day stomach simply wouldn't be able to cope with the bacteria and parasites that would inevitably find their way into your system. Number 2, you have cleanliness issues. You might think that having to wear your smelly tunic for days on end would be the worst part about living as a Viking. And yes, that would definitely be unpleasant. However, the biggest problem would be the lack of clean water. For the Vikings, a bath was a rare luxury and most people only bathed a few times per year. Baths were also communal affairs. The Vikings would bathe together in large wooden tubs heated over fires, and while this may sound pleasant enough, it wasn't always the case. Bathing was normally a pretty dirty affair. The Vikings would cover themselves in a type of scrub made from birch twigs and scrape it off to remove dirt and dead skin. They would then wash themselves with cold water and cover themselves in a type of clay to help dry up any remaining moisture. The clay would then be scraped off and the whole process would be repeated. It was not uncommon for people to use the same water for bathing and cleaning their entire body. So there would be a lot of germs and bacteria floating about. This would be absolutely disgusting to us today, but for the Vikings, it was just everyday life. You wouldn't last long as a Viking if you had cleanliness issues because you would likely become very ill due to a bacterial infection. Number 3, you can't hunt. It has been estimated that around half of all meals eaten by Vikings consisted of locally sourced meat. For men, hunting was an important part of Viking culture and provided them with food and materials for clothing. Hunting was also seen as a test of a man's skills and bravery. It was expected that young boys would start hunting at a very young age and they would often go on hunts with their fathers and brothers. By the time that they reached adulthood, most Viking men would be able to hunt a wide variety of animals, including deer, elk and wild boar. They would use a variety of weapons, including bows and arrows, spears and knives. If you couldn't hunt, you would definitely struggle to survive as a Viking, since finding alternative work would be impossible. For a male, not pulling your weight in society was grounds for banishment. Being banished didn't necessarily mean leaving the clan without your head attached to your shoulders, but it did mean leaving the clan empty-handed and alone. To say that you would likely freeze to death is a bit dramatic, but there is no denying that your chances of survival would decrease dramatically. Number 4. You can't fight. Fighting was another important part of Viking culture. As we all know, Vikings went to war frequently. Most Viking men would see combat at some point in their lives. There were many reasons why Vikings went to war. They fought over land, resources and power. They also raided other countries for plunder. Viking raids could be brutal and deadly affairs. Viking warriors would often kill anyone who got in their way. But even if you weren't a warrior, you would still be at risk during a raid. Viking raids were usually carried out on villages and towns. This meant that women, children and the elderly were often caught up in the violence. The Vikings didn't really do things by half. If you were captured during a Viking raid, you were likely to be sold into slavery. so you certainly wouldn't want to be caught unarmed. If you couldn't fight, you wouldn't last long as a Viking. You would be killed during a raid or battle, or captured and sold into slavery. Number 5, you can't sail. Sailing was an important part of Viking life. The Vikings used their ships to travel all over Europe, exploring new lands and raiding coastal settlements. Some Vikings even sailed as far afield as North America. The Vikings were skilled sailors and navigators, and they knew how to take advantage of the winds and currents to travel long distances quickly. They also knew how to build sturdy ships that could withstand the rough seas of the North Atlantic. If you couldn't sail, you wouldn't last long as a Viking. You would likely be killed in a battle at sea, or you would get lost and never be seen again. And even if you managed to stay alive, you would be pretty useless to your Viking crew. Being a sailor wasn't exactly easy work, but it did come with its perks. Many Viking sailors would tell tales of their adventures to make money. They would often embellish their stories to make them sound more exciting than they were. But that's a topic for another day. Number 6, you have asthma or any other respiratory condition. Throughout history, there have been many famous plagues that have wiped out huge portions of the population. The Black Death, which hit Europe in the 14th century, is perhaps the most well-known. It is estimated that the Black Death killed around half of all Europeans, but it wasn't the only plague to hit Europe. In the 9th century, a mysterious illness began to spread across the continent. It is thought that this illness may have been a type of plague. It spread quickly and killed thousands of people. One of the worst affected areas was Scandinavia. Scandinavia is made up of 3 countries, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. All 3 of these countries were badly hit by the illness. It is thought that the plague may have arrived in Scandinavia with Viking traders. The traders had traveled all over Europe, and the illness may have been brought back with them. Whatever the cause, the illness had a devastating impact on Scandinavia. It is thought that around 50% of the population was killed. The illness seems to have come out of nowhere, and there was nothing that the Vikings could do to stop it. They didn't understand what was causing the illness, and there was no cure. All they could do was watch helplessly as their friends and family died around them. If a plague like this hit today, it's likely that you would be one of the casualties. This is because modern medicine has advanced so much that most people are immune to many of the world's most dangerous diseases. However, respiratory illnesses are still a leading cause of death worldwide. Asthma alone kills around 250,000 people each year. So if you have asthma or any other respiratory condition, you wouldn't last long as a Viking. Number 7. You are under 5 foot tall. The average height of a Viking man has been estimated to be around 5 foot 6 inches. This was slightly taller than the average European man of the time. However, the Vikings were a tall people by modern standards. Today, the average American man is around 5 foot 9 inches tall. So you wouldn't last long as a Viking if you were under 5 foot tall. Not only would you be at a disadvantage in battle, but you would also be seen as a bit of a runt of the litter. This wouldn't necessarily get you killed, but it would make your life as a Viking pretty difficult. That brings us to the end of today's video. Let me know in the comments below if you think you could survive a week as a Viking. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.